Right, just before I let you know what's coming up on the show, I've got a joke for you, Rich.
All right.
Why did the chicken cross the playground?
No idea.
He wanted to get to the other slide.
Oh my God.
Rich, what do you reckon? Should we go back to Southern sayings?
I like that.
I don't know.
Podcast 60 from the Wiggly Sofa, and I'm Heather from Wiggly Wigglers, and I'm joined today by
Richard from Wiggly Wigglers.
And I'm Farmer Phil.
Excellent. Anyway, I've recorded an interview with Neil Foley, also known as Pod Chef, across the pond, and that will be coming up shortly in a few weeks. And he talks about how he uses bokashi and how he farms and gardens and how he uses his produce on his island.
Excellent. That should
in
be
Washington.
interesting. Was he a good bloke to talk to?
Yeah, it was really good. But I thought because he was of Irish descent, he would have an Irish accent, but he didn't. He was American.
They did move over a long time ago, didn't they?
Feedback from Simon Sherlock to Rach. He says, a few weeks ago, Rach, I emailed to say my bokashi bin was making me feel sick because it had that pit of your stomach sickness.
Oh, excellent.
Usually caused by being a poor farmer's son and having to fork silage at 5:30 a.m. on a cold winter's morning. You very kindly rang and spoke to my wife with the suggestion of adding an extra handful of bokashi to the bin every time I added stuff. I thought I should let you know that it works a treat, and we're both very grateful. Me, because it no longer makes me feel sick when I add it and empty it. And my wife, because the kitchen now smells so much better. So cheers. Especially for taking the trouble to ring, even if I was out. That's his first bit of feedback, and then there's a second story, which is to us. Hi, Wiggly Podcast team. While listening to Podcast 58, I was really interested in how bokashi keeps rats and mice away, and I wondered whether it would keep the neighbours' BTBs away. It's another one of those, yeah.
Another one, yeah.
Do you know what that is standing for?
Bloody Tom Baker. BTV.
No, Phil?
Big Troublesome Boys.
It's good.
Big Troublesome Boys.
No, it's this is ridiculous, but it's bird torturing bee.
Excellent. No.
And pussycats.
No, excellent. Oh, another man after one.
Yeah, I thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
He wondered if it would keep the neighbour's bird torturing away if I place it under the bird table. I was a little disheartened when Richard mentioned that his dogs dug it up. But if you could find an animal-friendly way of keeping cats out of the gardens and off the borders, you realise that you will become very, very rich.
Oh, absolutely.
Cheers, Simon.
Yeah, he's completely right. We've talked
No,
about this
he's not
before.
right.
We've talked about this before. He is. Cats are a nightmare, and they really are. You know, you just have this pet that you consider to be perfectly reasonable to let out, and they go and in someone's garden, kill their birds. I mean, you know, it's astonishingly grim, really. And especially, you know, in our society, we're all getting closer and closer together. I wouldn't let my dog go run around my neighbour's garden and kill everything in sight. You just don't do it, do you? But it's perfectly reasonable for an owner to let a cat do it.
Right.
Because it's not, is it? It's not. So, yeah, but no, I mean...
No, whoa, just stop. Just one doggone cotton-picking minute. You've missed out a few salient points there.
Yeah.
First of all,
Yeah.
if a cat poos in your garden, that's fertilising it. So just move on.
No, it's not.
It doesn't matter. It
There's
doesn't
all
matter.
sorts of nasties in cat faeces.
Oh, in his border. It's his flower border.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
you've got to
going
get
to
in
harm
there
him.
and weed it. No,
Right.
it's grim. Honestly, Hev. I know you like Noah.
I don't like him. I love him.
You love him. And that's he is a nice chap, for sure.
I think there's a
but,
bit of a
you know.
rant going on here, team.
But I mean, I suppose we're getting off the subject a bit. But I mean, if we could find something to keep cats out of people's gardens, that would be ideal. We've tried things, haven't we? We've tried little sonic emitters.
Yeah, we tried that, and we sent them out to our customers to try.
Supposedly keep cats away. And I think, in an instance where you don't have dominant cats, that's fine. But it seems to be that if you have cats, that's their particular territory. So chances are his neighbour's cat is going to consider his garden to be its territory also. So they don't really work. And you can get things. Gamekeepers, Phil, they use a really smelly, like a kind of, it's almost like a bitumen-based stuff that you soak onto rags, old Hessian sacks, put around the pheasant pens to try and keep the foxes away.
The trouble is that realistically, anything that is going to be smelly enough and unpleasant enough to keep a cat away isn't going to be really what you want in the garden.
That's the trouble, isn't it?
I mean, there are sort of tales you've heard of people using lion muck from the zoo and things like this. Well, this isn't what you have in your garden.
Just live with the cat. And look at the irony of this, right? He says, I'm interested in how Bokashi keeps rats and mice away.
Yeah.
Just a minute. You need a cat.
Yeah.
Cats keep rats and mice away.
Yeah, but
my cat does.
Cats are okay for killing mice, but they're usually pretty crap at killing rats because they're cowards, essentially, cats. So they're not, they're fairly.
Tell him the story of the fox.
I think, Ricardo, that you have lost the plot slightly. Since I know Noah has killed at least 2 foxes in his time, rats are of no consequence to him. But the real point is that in answer to the feedback that sadly I don't think Bokashi has any deterrent effect on cats at all.
No.
I don't know why it has a deterrent effect on rats and mice, but I know that it does, which is a handy thing to know.
Yeah.
But I suppose there is the thinking that if the rats and mice are deterred, they won't be there for the cat to chase. So I don't know. I mean, you can go around it all the ways you like.
Like companion planting.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Well, sounds
dearie
good.
me.
So I don't know what I do know what the answer is, but unfortunately it's very antisocial and I couldn't possibly say what the answer is.
The answer is quite obviously much more about balance, so that if the birds are plentiful and healthy, then if the cat takes a few out, then the consequences are not so dire.
No way, no, Phil, no. There's no.
Of course, that is
any
right.
bird lost to a cat is bad news. I'll tell you what. One of my old neighbours, lovely old woman, Mrs. English, she used to have one of those high-powered water pistols. Like a big, like a water pistol rifle, really. And she used to go out there waddling around. I mean, this is the injustice of the whole thing. This is, these cats were driving this poor, beautiful old person insane. So she used to waddle out of her thing and blast the cats with a jet of water, and that used to send them scurrying off. What can you do at night? What can you do at night when the cat is indiscriminately murdering all the lovely creatures in your garden? I mean, what do you do? What is the answer?
So, are you seriously telling me that you wouldn't feed your birds because somebody else had a cat? That is ridiculous.
No. Oh no, I wouldn't necessarily. I wouldn't feed the birds in my garden if I had a cat.
Why?
I wouldn't try and encourage the birds into my garden only to
But
predispose them to
it's been proven.
unnecessary torture.
Oh, that's ridiculous. If you look at the balance of the Wiggly garden,
at night.
yeah,
Yeah.
When
did you last see a bird be caught by a cat at night?
Not at night.
You just said that
yeah,
the cat
but
was
there
going to
are
murder
other
them
things
at
that come out
night.
at night. There are lovely little yellow-necked mice and bank voles and wood mice and all these beautiful little creatures. Yeah, but they've got a place, haven't they?
Yeah, and the thing is, though, are you seriously saying that the Wiggly Garden is incorrect for feeding birds when we have one cat?
No.
Because you are wrong about that.
But we have. But what you're forgetting here is we have the luxury of space here. The topography is spread out. The birds have got access to really good vision, so they're able to see psychotic Noah coming from a distance. So we can afford to feed the birds here, which we do, like millions of tons of feed every week.
We do.
But that's fine. But in lots of instances, what people have, they don't have that luxury of space, so they have small quadrants of garden. And to have someone else's pet come in and completely adulterise their personal space
I've got this vision of
these
poor elderly people stalking their
terrible?
Gardens with their super soakers. It's like Vietnam of Catland.
I said this, when Rach and I were doing our podcast, we talked a little bit about cats skipped over the
This is absolute rubbish.
But Chris
Packham,
Chris
no,
Packham,
don't hold my hand. Just don't.
Chris Packham was he had, when he talked about how much he hated cats many years ago now, a long time ago, just a TV presenter, not that he hated cats, but how much he thought cats were destructive in many aspects. He had lots of hate mail. People were, cat owners were writing in and saying they were going to chop his arms and legs off and all sorts of things.
Bill Oddie said that there is no excuse for not feeding your birds if you have a cat. And I agree with him, because the point is that if you provide more food and therefore you give those little fledgling birds more of a chance, then the balance is better than not feeding them at all. The idea that you shouldn't feed birds because a cat might get one is just ridiculous in my opinion.
But that's not what the guy's asking anyway, is it?
You said that.
Okay, a classic example is someone at one of our open days last year, she came up and she said, I've got a cat, it's a real killer, it tries to kill everything that comes into the garden, but I really want to feed the birds. I said, well, in all honesty, if the cat, because they do have slightly different personalities, some aren't quite as murderous as others, but the situation she was in is she really was hell-bent on encouraging birds into the garden. And literally, I can only reiterate that she was predisposing those birds to an unfortunate set of circumstances. So, yeah, she was providing peanuts, but she was also providing them with an immediate end to their lovely little lives.
I've just got one thing to add to this, by way of example, that in northeast Scotland, I think it was, they had a very rare occurrence. A red-breasted swallow turned up, blown off course from Europe. And all the twitchers were watching this bird. It was 25 years since they saw the last one, and in front of their eyes, down came the sparrowhawk, thump, no more swallow. And they all looked at each other and said, oh, it's gone. So, on that basis, are you out for sparrowhawks?
No, but sparrowhawks are indigenous, Phil. They have a place in our
whether
ecology.
You call them indigenous or not, pet cats have their
if you say
benefits.
to someone about a cat, they say, cats, it's nature. But of course it's not nature. The cats wouldn't be roaming about if it weren't for us.
Richard,
if
you are going to
crack your little Felix packet open at night. Come on, little pussycat, come in here and this will build your strength up to go out and slaughter some more innocent little creatures.
It's conservation gone mad. You're trying to pick a time, which species is indigenous and which isn't, right? And cats bring people, humans, mega pleasure. And the idea that you are some sort of criminal for having a cat just because it may at some point kill, and how many? Tiny amount, I bet you, of birds compared to the benefits of actually feeding them. It's just outrageous.
No.
You've got a dog. A dog is not an indigenous species.
But it doesn't go out, and I don't let it go up in someone else's garden.
Your dog kills rabbits.
My dog's got a totally murderous nature. But the point is, I don't let it kill things out of my control. That's the point. I don't indiscriminately open the door and let it wander across the countryside and other people's property and lots of different potentially threatened habitat to indiscriminately kill stuff.
When I was sipping my wine at your lovely abode in the summer, your dog terrorised 3 passer-by ramblers by roughing at them at the gate, and they were frightened out of their wits.
Yeah.
So you've caused those people stress and hassle.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. They didn't lose their lives, did they? They weren't there twittering and singing their little hearts out, their little tiny pumping hearts for the pleasure of all, only to be mauled to death by someone's fat Felix.
The idea that it is okay for you to own a non-indigenous
Your hair looks really nice
pet.
like that.
The idea that it's okay for you to own a non-indigenous pet and that I mustn't, my Noah...
No, I'm not saying you mustn't. There are lots of things you can do with cats. You can pull their claws out. You can keep them in the cages. You can be a house cat. There are lots of things you could do with them. I've seen cats, with runs outside. They can go around in their run, but what they can't do is escape and cause other people unnecessary misery.
My cat is part of the farm. My cat controls vermin. My cat brings me lots of pleasure, and other cats do, and you're not weighing that into the equation.
But there are lots of things that bring you lots of pleasure. Me, for instance. I know Farmer Phil brings you untold pleasures.
The Wiggly Podcast. Let your iPod bloom.
A small aside, I was at the podcast conference on Saturday and I was on the panel. And I just want to prove to you that I do speak a lot of sense by playing you my blog. Here we go.
Hi, it was good to hear you and your contribution to the podcast on 2006 yesterday, and it was nice to hear from someone speaking about the business side of things and podcasting, but actually making a bit of sense and actually having a degree of success at it. So congratulations, well done, and hope to see you at next year's podcast, Con.
Obviously caught you on a good day then, making sense.
See, this is the lack of respect I get from you. See, that was Mark from the Tartan Podcast. And although I'm not really into music, I listen to his show and it's really nice.
Right.
He kind of picks new bands in Scotland and he kind of plays them. I showed you it, didn't I?
You used to like the Bay City Rollers. They were a Scottish band you liked, weren't they?
Well, they were very good. Oh, Michael's fell off his chair. No, but what I really want to say was we're getting a bit of oomph with this podcast because I've now been invited to go and share in a stakeholder discussion with the Minister of Agriculture, David Miliband, and it's on One Planet Farming, and they've invited us for our contribution. Right. So I shall go along and see how that goes.
Right.
And if you want to see what he's on about with regard to One Planet Farming, I've put a link in my blog on these show notes. So podcast 60 show notes. Go to wigglywiggles.blogspot.com, and on the subject of communication, the farm phone's in. You can leave a message on the farm phone for inclusion in this podcast. Obviously, if you make it 20 minutes long, Richard will ban you from coming on because he has to waffle for a good 20 minutes. So good, short, quick comments, no longer than 3 minutes would be just the jolly job. And you phone, if you're overseas, +44 1981 500 930. And if you're in the UK, 01981 500 930. And you'll hear me saying, please leave a message for the podcast.
Excellent.
So that would be great. And we've got Greg Fowler coming up, who's your bank manager, Phil.
He is. Very good friend of mine right now.
Yeah.
He's always inquiring after my health.
That's funny because he wrote me a note about life insurance and how we needed extra cover. He did, really.
Really?
Yeah.
Play.
So he's coming up shortly and I can't wait to hear it because it was at Phil's annual review to see how the farm is doing. But I just wanted to have a quick chat with you about energy crops because I know Phil's got some views and Richard's got some views, and there was a wonderful letter which you can get to on the Farmers Weekly website. It was in the Farmers Weekly, but I doubt most of you will have that. But if you go to www.fwi.co.uk, the letter's up there from James Wallace in Cambridgeshire, and he talks about energy crops and this and that.
I think energy is the topic of the moment, and it's going to get more so. That oil is running out at a rapid rate of knots, and therefore alternative or so-called alternative energy sources are going to have to be taken advantage of, and one of them is obviously growing energy crops. But of course, in a world where food is becoming scarcer, if you like, on a global scale, every piece of land that is taken out to grow energy crops therefore isn't growing crops for food. And I think that those two factors will increase the pressure on productive farmland.
Yeah, in many respects it could be the downfall of biodiversity, couldn't it?
Well, there is a danger because, of course, we, in my capacity as a member and committee member of FWAG, the thought is that pressure on land immediately, the first land that is put under pressure is land set aside for environmental strips and even whole fields put aside for environmental purposes. Pressure on land will raise commodity prices, and the pressure will then be to plough these fields back up.
Yeah.
And so that will be an issue, I think. I've spoken to one or two people who said, oh, well, I've got X acres of environmental strips, which if the price of wheat goes above a certain figure, we'll plough them straight up again because we'll make more money out of that than we will out of the government payments for the strips.
Yeah.
So that there are issues that are going to be raised by this.
What are these energy crops? Because I can't quite imagine them.
Well, there are all
Is that rape
sorts.
or?
I'm learning a lot about this right now, but the obvious one is oilseed rape, because you can crush the oil and refine it to make a diesel substitute. And then there's the ones that you can burn them as biomass to produce heat. but there is a process where you ferment or digest organic matter of any sort and put it through a factory process, and it uses its own energy to drive the factory and comes out with fuel at the other end in the form of a biodiesel. And that, I think, is going to be the flexible way of producing fuel from everything from cow muck to chopped up willow trees. But all that resource requires land, so it doesn't matter whether it's from animals or crops or whatever, it will be land that produces it. And land producing material for energy is land not producing food.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, we've just been thrown into a situation now where we've had the Stern report that's looking at the economics of climate change, really. And I think in many respects that's a government tack, because the last thing government want to do is create all sorts of problems through frightening people with the reality that our fossil fuels are going to run out and we are in desperate need for alternatives. There are a couple of different views. A pessimistic view is that we are going to reach peak oil in the next couple of years. And the optimists are thinking that we can reach peak oil in 20 years. Now, if it's in the next 20 years, then the chances are we can work up enough renewable energy sources in that time to replace our reliance on fossil fuels. But of course, if it's in the short term, then we're really going to struggle.
And also, I think that it's relevant. I saw a statistic somewhere that said by 1973 we'd used half the planet's oil reserves. And given that we are using the easy ones to get out first, this reliance on potential oil reserves that may be extremely difficult to get out or may be very detrimental to the environment that they come from, like the tar sands and so on, even if you ignore the possibility of global warming, which is arguable, and the availability of water, the increased food requirement of the planet is there. People are getting wealthier. In underdeveloped countries. They're wanting to buy more food. Somebody's got to produce it.
Yeah. Far be it from me to criticise on your global views, but I want to know about the nitty-gritty. What crop do you plant? How do you get it? And is the energy that's used actually growing that crop more than the crop that you produce?
In Herefordshire, there's quite a good start in energy crops. We've got John Amos pioneering the planting of miscanthus, which is a big biomass plant which grows to about 8 foot tall. On the face of it, there isn't an obvious environmental detriment to it, but there doesn't seem to be much benefit either. But it's a very efficient way of producing material to burn for heat.
Miscanthus does have an environmental detriment, doesn't it? It spreads all over the place. And
it spreads all over the place. Well, one of the major problems, going back to the fact that we're going to lose all sorts of biodiversity, is that you need such massive tracts of land to plant a single species.
That's
so
right.
It's monoculture to the extreme. I mean, potentially it's monoculture. The implications are so much greater than the problems associated with the existing monoculture that we have now with wheat, oil.
I think there are many issues, but to me, the best compromise is to use our waste products much more effectively and to think more in terms of local energy production. So using waste products or straw from a wheat crop to heat a village or a business site or something, or just a single house. It's much more efficient. Power stations are inefficient things by and large. And on a smaller scale, it's more efficient, and that must be the way to go.
Absolutely. I mean, why aren't developers being encouraged? I mean, I suppose they are being encouraged, but you see, at the moment, the profit, the margins are just the be-all and end-all to a developer's determination to complete their site. The fact is that if all properties had photovoltaic solar panels, even wind-propelled B&Q specials, they're absolutely better than nothing. That would make such a massive difference to this country.
You two won't stick on my point, because what I'm trying to share with you is the key point from James Wallace's letter, which is that energy crops aren't actually new at all. If you go back a century, 40% of arable production in the UK was for biofuels. That was in the form of hay and oats for horse feed.
Right.
And the difference between then and now is that the requirement for more food basically made the horse inefficient, and so we went to tractors and so on, and we've turned that land over to production of food, and now we're going to have to start to think in terms of turning some back. The food requirement hasn't gone down, hence the pressure.
History repeats.
There'll be more to talk about on this subject, I'm sure. If you want to comment, phone the farm phone or leave a message on my blog or my Chingo, or email
Richard@wigglywigglers.co.uk
or
pwg@lowerblakemere.co.uk.
Shouldn't you have a Farmer Phil address by now?
I suppose I could have a farmer. That's a lot more letters to type, and my typing's not up to much.
Well, we would go now to hear about Garby's meeting with his bank manager, Greg Fowler, but because you've gone on about my innocent, beautiful, chocolate, Burmese pussy cat, whom I love,
there's one word in there that is
to.
completely inappropriate.
What is that?
Innocent.
But the thing is, I think we should cut that bit out and go to the bank manager, because you're outrageous with your views on cats, but no matter. Did you see my blog in which Podchef picked the top 5 Wiggly podcasts?
I did, yeah.
Just for those of you who haven't seen it, number 1 podcast was The Hedgerow Row. Nice. He picks topics because he likes the way they come back to each other. Number 2 was The Supermarket Row with Dick, remember?
Yeah, that was good.
Number 3 was In the Cowshed at Night. Number 4 was Bokashi and EM. And number 5 was Pheasant Shooting. And then he came back and said that last week's show, which was the one about luck money and sheep and...
I still haven't listened to that, yet.
Ah, well, he puts that one in the top 5. So
right.
If you've missed podcast number 58, then have a listen in. And so, from this week's Wiggly Sofa, obviously the cat's not in here, otherwise it would be so upset. I am sure it would scratch
the cat's in
Richard's
the bag.
eyes out. So it's goodbye from Toast.
Goodbye from Farmer Phil.
Goodbye from me, Heather.
And it's goodbye from me.
That's Richard.
So awkward, isn't he?
It's very good.
Yeah, I love him.
Yeah.
It's like having a little boy. He's just intent on being... We have to give him lines.
Naughty. Naughty boy.
Yeah.
Richard, will be a good boy.
I shall conform. I like that.
Can I have that in writing?
1,000 times.